Hello, everyone. This is Kate Fowler with the South Carolina History Newsletter. And today I'm so excited to be interviewing Tally Johnson about the haunted history of South Carolina as we head into spooky season. And as an aside, I do hope everyone is doing okay post Hurricane Helene. I know it's been a really difficult time for us in the state and across the Southeast. So my heart is going out to everybody, and I hope everybody's okay. But as we head into spooky season, I thought this would kind of lighten our spirits to speak with Tally. And very quickly, I'd like to read his bio, which is really interesting. Mr. Johnson is a native South Carolinian and a graduate of Spartanburg Methodist College and Wofford College with degrees in history. He is the author of Ghosts of the South Carolina Upcountry, Ghosts of the South Carolina Midlands, Ghosts of the Pee Dee all for the History Press, and Civil War Ghosts of South Carolina for Prospective Press, and has short stories in Off the Beaten Path 3 and Tales from the Old Black Ambulance for Prospective Press. He is also the author of a Southern Gothic short story collection, Creek Walking, for Falstaff Books. He is the winner of the Caldwell Sims Award for Excellence in Southern Folklore from the USC-Union Upcountry Literary Festival. He has collaborated with Valentine Wolfe, contributing narration for the track The Bloody Bonnet at Blue Hole for their album Winter Night Whisperings. He has also contributed narration for the track Alice on the album Carolina Folklore by Antler Hill. He is on the roster of approved artists as an author, as well as the South Carolina School Librarians List of Storytellers. He enjoys spending time with his family and friends, hiking, hammock camping, that sounds fun, visiting historic sites, and reading. He has been a guest at Congregate, Con Carolinas, also serving as paranormal track manager for several years, Fandom Fest, MonsterCon, Mysticon, Atomicon, Retcon, and Imaginarium, as well as a storyteller at several festivals, state parks, schools, and libraries all over South Carolina and the Southeast. He is currently branch manager at the Kershaw branch of the Lancaster County Library. Tally, welcome so much. Welcome to you. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So, can you give us an overview of how you became interested in paranormal activity here in South Carolina?
Yeah, I when I was in fifth grade in Lyman Elementary, and Lyman's a small town between Greenville and Spartanburg, for those who aren't natives. A lady named Nancy Roberts came to do a talk about South Carolina goes to to my grade. And as she's telling her stories, she's talking about places that I not only know about, but I've been to. Kings Mountain, Charleston, Columbia, Charlotte, um, Savannah. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, wait, we have ghosts in South Carolina? Because most of the time it's ghosts are from Europe, haunted castles and, maidens in distress and all that. And I'm like, we have ghosts here. I can go find these places. And being a history nerd from birth and being a library junkie since about then, I went to the library, found all her books, devoured them, and some 40 years later, here we are.
And now, how many books have you
And I
written?
highly recommend her stuff. I have the four ghost story books and the one short story collection, and I am currently working on three more.
Good for you.
Two nonfiction and one fiction. So,
That's
and one of
fantastic.
them will have more South Carolina stuff in it. So,
Oh, wow. And you're doing all this while also being the branch manager at is it the Kershaw County Library, was it? Lancaster County
it's the
Library
Kershaw branch of the
branch.
Lancaster County Library. Yeah,
So you have to be really good with your
yeah.
time management then.
I try. It's been a process. I've had some writer's block for the last couple of years, but I'm trying to get back on the horse because surprisingly enough, folks are like, "We want another book. Where's our book at? We need another book." So,
I love it. Well, I would love it if you could walk us through. I'm here in Greenville, so I'm biased to the upcountry, but can you give us a couple ghost stories from up here in the upcountry area of South Carolina?
yeah, you had mentioned when we were corresponding about today, Poinsett Bridge.
Yes.
I have a soft spot for Poinsett Bridge. It's one of the first haunted places I went to by myself after I got my driver's license. A little bit of background about the bridge. It is off of Highway 11 near Tigerville, north of Greenville, and it is in the Poinsett Bridge Natural Preserve. Be respectful. Don't take anything. Don't trash the nature trail with beer cans,
Hmm.
please. Kind of things you now have to tell folks. Don't vandalize, don't trespass. But the bridge was part of the old state road that ran from Columbia to what is now the town of Saluda in an attempt to get around Saluda Grade. And it is the oldest existing bridge in South Carolina and possibly in the Southeast.
Mm.
Built in 1820, named for Joel R. Poinsett, who ministered to Mexico and Secretary of War, and the namesake of the poinsettia,
Hmm.
everybody's favorite Christmas flower. The story about Poinsett Bridge is if you go around dusk, you may hear voices speaking a foreign language around the bridge, and it's possible you may see lights floating on the bridge.
Hmm.
And of course, where the bridge is, there's no power. It's about 15 foot long, 130 feet over Little Gap Creek, which is a small, shallow stream. And one of the speculations in the book that I did not write claims that the voices are speaking Chinese. Well, no. In 1820, you still would have had African slaves who were imported before the ban on the slave trade in 1808.
Hmm.
So you would have had first and second generation African natives who were recently enslaved. And if I am working on a project that involved manual labor, um, potential injury from falling rocks and falling off ladders and whatnot, if I'm going to talk smack about my boss, the overseer, I'm not going to do it in English.
Right.
I'm going to use my native tongue, Igbo, another tribal language from Africa. And that is what you will hear if you go. Um, and I've heard the murmuring. It sounds like the conversation you hear at a party just before you walk into the room
Yes.
and you realize you're not at the right party. You know how everybody just shuts up and looks at you?
Yes.
It's like that. You approach the door to the ballroom, and when you open it, it's quiet. But when you're walking up, you hear the
Oh,
snippets and
wow.
pieces of the conversation.
Hmm.
And it's fascinating. And I mean, it's one of those things. We may go up there this evening. I won't hear it. You will. We go back next weekend, vice versa. And then the next time we go, neither one of us hears anything.
Mm.
I mean, they're ghosts. They don't perform on command.
Yeah. But you've definitely
That's one
heard
of my
it.
favorite. Oh yes, ma'am.
Oh my
Now
gosh.
there is a
And
story that during the go ahead.
and you go so the you go around dusk, like that's very important. The timing.
That seems to be the best time, and I think it's because there's a fair amount of traffic on Highway 11, and I think getting towards dark, that traffic has thinned out some,
Mm.
and you can hear better. But there is a
Wow.
theory in ghost circles, in quotes, that dawn, dusk are liminal times when the quote unquote veil gets thin,
The veil
and
gets
it's
thin.
easier. Yeah, it's easier to hear if you're inclined to be sensitive. The sensitivity is increased.
And then
Um,
so the African kind of murmurings, we think that those are the spirits of of enslaved people from when they would kind of they would go down this, it was a state road, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then the lights, what do we think that's about? Is that kind of the lanterns that people used to have, or what do we think
The
that is?
speculation on that is that the spirits of the slaves who were in the area.
Hmm.
That's kind of how they manifest.
Oh, okay.
Um, I've not seen the lights, but I've heard from folks who have, and they're like a little bigger than a firefly or a lightning bug,
Hmm.
and they're different colors. They're oranges and blues instead of your standard yellow.
Oh my goodness.
Um, but like I say, it's not anything creepy. Nothing's gonna jump out and eat you. It's just a way for those people for their contribution to be remembered because
Yes.
I mean the
Yes.
Bridge of the Marble. I mean it's one of those things. I mean it's 100 and 200 years old. It still stands, and you could probably take a motorcycle over it and not have any issues. I wouldn't take a huge dually pickup truck, but I mean something like a motorcycle could probably cross it and not have any issues because it's that solidly built.
Mm.
And I mean, it's a testament to their craftsmanship. And I think I'm speculating, but there may be some point of pride in we built that. Check it
Hmm.
out. We did this.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's a way for them not to be forgotten.
Absolutely. And then, in our South Carolina History Newsletter Facebook group that we have, I remember writing a couple months ago
Mhm.
about asking if people had specific kind of ghost experiences, and somebody brought up, speaking of lights, he brought up a cemetery, and I'm so sorry I can't remember where it is, but maybe you can help me figure out. There's a cemetery somewhere in South Carolina where you park your car, and the spirit of the old cemetery worker comes out with a lantern, and people have had handprints on their car kind of going down, and the lights come out. And do you know which ghost story this might be? Does this ring a bell?
There are a couple of different ones. If you haven't asked me, I could have told you, but right this second, I am not sure, and I don't want to speculate and be wrong.
It's okay.
Because I mean they're stories, but I like to get my facts straight, and I don't want to say it's so and
Of
so, and somebody
course.
comes
Yeah,
back and says no, he
absolutely.
doesn't know what he's talking about. It's this one. So yeah,
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I'll write you later about that one. That was pretty cool because
I hear you.
the
Yeah,
subscriber had done it himself, and he had seen the light, and he had felt the presence, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I have a 12-year-old stepson, and I told him about it, and he goes, "When can we go? When can we go?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness." But
exactly. Yeah,
I know, right? Okay, so Poinsett Bridge is a place to go if you're looking to um, you know, potentially see spirits, feel them, hear them. What might be another
hmm
place to go up here in the upcountry?
I have to preface this story by quoting the park ranger who told me about a lot of the experiences. There are no ghosts in any National Park Service or state park properties in South Carolina.
Okay.
That is the official line from those entities.
Hmm.
With that being said, Kings Mountain State Park and the National Historic Battleground is haunted.
Oh my gosh.
Um, I have heard stories of people being there for the reenactment, which sadly Helene canceled this year.
Hmm.
Um, voices in the woods, gunshots, smelling gunpowder on the nature trail. Um, my personal experience involves Patrick Ferguson. And for the handful of listeners who don't know who Patrick Ferguson was, he was the only British soldier at the Battle of Kings Mountain.
Oh, okay.
The both armies were comprised of Carolinians and people who are from now what is now Tennessee. They were all Americans, Tories and um, Whigs, the American in quotes. Um, Ferguson invented the Ferguson rifle, which was basically a prototype sniper rifle.
Mm,
Supposedly, at the Battle of Brandywine up in Pennsylvania, he had George Washington in his sights and refused to shoot him because he would not shoot an officer in the back.
interesting.
Fast forward to October 1781, General Cornwallis has sent him to subdue the backcountry and the over mountain men in Tennessee. He issues a proclamation demanding that the inhabitants submit to the crown or he will lay waste to them with fire and sword,
Mm,
which is not the best way to make friends and influence people, especially among, and I speak for myself in this statement, a bunch of rednecks. Um, Not the
love
best
it.
course of action. It's like kicking the jukebox at a honky tonk. It's just not a good way to be. And he arrives at Kings Mountain, arrays his troops on top of the hill, and the American commanders basically send their men up Indian style, hiding behind rocks and trees, firing pot shots. And to Ferguson's credit, his personal bravery is beyond reproach. He was on horseback wearing a blue and white striped vest.
Mm.
And anytime one of his troops raised a white flag, he would personally use his saber to either cut the stick and or the hand of the person holding it.
Oh, wow.
And when they found his body on top of the mountain, it had 14 bullet wounds in it, and I think 4 or 5 saber cuts. Um, so I mean, to his credit, I mean he was there until the bitter end of the battle, did not flee, like someone else I'll mention in a minute. Um, and the Americans buried him on the site under a cairn, big pile of stones. That is still on the battlefield, and it's traditional. If you do the nature trail when you pass Ferguson's grave, you drop a stone on the pile.
Mm, hmm.
Ferguson's still not a huge fan of Americans, though. There have been reports of people seeing a figure with bright red hair and a blue and white vest
Hmm.
standing by some of the oak trees surrounding near the grave. And he has been known to occasionally throw acorns at people.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
you will see him you will see him walk from tree to tree, and it's possible instead of falling straight down, an acorn will come at you horizontally.
Oh,
Um, and people have heard him snicker as some of the tourists have passed. And I
wow.
think, obviously, and justifiably so, he kind of still holds a grudge.
A grudge. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Have you felt the acorn on your body before?
Um, I have I have heard voices on the battlefield, and it's random, one of those any time of day things. I've heard voices on the battlefield. I've heard gunshots.
Hmm.
And because the nature trail kind of goes around the mountain and the American staging area was at the base. And I've heard the gunshots coming from down the hill, not outside like someone deer hunting or squirrel hunting.
Sure. Yeah.
These are much closer, and um, so I've heard those. I've heard of folks having replica lanterns blown out, walking to the reenactors campground on the site. Um, People have been pushed on the hike on the nature trail, the interpretive path.
Oh wow.
So I mean, it's a fairly active spot. But if you ask at the visitor center, there's no such thing.
Wow. And do you,
So
Tyler, do
you kind of
you,
have to go and do it yourself.
Do it yourself. Tally, do you have special equipment that you ever use to kind of pick up on vibrations or sounds?
Um, when I'm doing a quote unquote formal investigation, I use a old school tape recorder.
Hmm,
Um, I have used digital. I seem like I get better responses with the tape. I'm not sure why that is.
interesting.
Um, I will take a actual camera, um, and I have been known to use both color and black and white film, and I take a pad and pencil. Um, Normally, I don't go with a team per se. I don't have the REM pods and the ghost boxes and the different meters and things. Uh, for me, I'm not so much about evidence as I am a story.
Hmm.
I'm more interested in the folklore, keeping these memories, these people's memories alive, the history,
Sure.
versus I have to find evidence. Because even if I found evidence and I played you a tape of someone being snarky on the trail at Kings Mountain, it wouldn't convince you. But if I could tell you that story,
Yeah,
at least, and now you're intrigued.
absolutely.
You want to go see for yourself. And then if you have an experience, well, you're convinced.
Yes.
Whereas seeing that photo or hearing that tape probably wouldn't do anything either way. You'd be like, oh, that's neat, and we'd
Mhm.
move on with our day. But hearing the story, you're more like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
So,
I love it. Now can you take us to some ghost stories of the Civil War? I know our audience would love that.
yeah, and this one was an accidental discovery, as they say. It happened to me at Rivers Bridge State Park down in Spartanburg County. Um, when I was working on my book on South Carolina Midlands, one thing I try to do is I try to do a site verification visit at the very least to make sure the site's where they say it is, it's publicly accessible, because I don't want to use private residences,
Sure.
because I don't want to encourage people to trespass and harass people and all that. So publicly accessible, still in situ where it's supposed to be. And if I'm lucky enough to have something happen, great. And if I'm not, then I'll tell that part too.
Hmm.
But I had decided to do, deadline was coming up. I had about 8 places I needed to go verify. I hadn't done yet. So one balmy Carolina August day, I decided to go for a drive
Hmm.
from Chester to Fort Mott to Bamberg to Aiken to Abbeville, Greenwood, and home.
Okay.
Yeah. If you get on Google Maps, it's about 8 hours worth of drive.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Um, this was 20 years ago, so I could do that and not pay the price the next week.
Hmm.
But as I do this stops and verified, along about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I am tired of being in the car. I want to get out. I'm not looking forward to being out in 100-degree heat with 200% humidity, but I'm tired of sitting in the driver's seat. So I stop at Rivers Bridge because I know they have a little interpretive trail. And I stop and I'm like, well, the battle happened in early February 1865. 2,000 Confederates under General McLaws, Lafayette McLaws, and 22,000 of Sherman's troops coming out of Savannah,
Mm.
coming somewhere in South Carolina to get revenge for Fort Sumter, whether Charleston or Columbia or Aiken, no one knew. And I'm like, this is perfect. There are no ghosts here. It's August. It'll be fine. So I park my car and I have the place to myself. And I go down the hill, little small hill, to Saltcaster Creek or swamp, Blackwater Swamp. And if you've not been in a Blackwater Swamp, it is exactly what the name implies. the oak leaves and the other vegetable
Mm,
matter falls into water. The tannins are leached out, and the water is jet black. I mean,
wow.
if you stick your arm in, after about a foot, your hand vanishes.
Oh my
And
goodness.
there is wildlife in there. I mean, there are water moccasins and etc. And I'm smart enough to know I'm not going near that.
Sure.
And so I go down and I pass the old Confederate earthworks and I read the interpretive sign. And as I'm standing at the bottom of the hill trying to decide if it's worth pressing on, with it being 95 in the shade versus 102 in the sun, I look into the swamp, and about 100 yards from me, I see a figure in a blue wool coat, long blonde hair, and a walrus mustache,
Hmm.
wading waist deep in the water.
Really?
And my first thought was, okay, A, you're going to die of heat stroke, and B, you're not supposed to get off the trail in the state park.
Right.
So I began to holler, hey, get out of there.
Yeah.
As soon as hay left my mouth, the gentleman throws his arms out and falls backwards into the water.
No.
There is no splash or even a ripple.
Whoa.
And that was my exact response. I'm like, I'm done. I turned around, walked back up the hill to my car,
Mhm.
and got in the car and went back to Bamberg, found something to eat. I'm done. Yeah, and like I was saying, when I am looking in quotes for ghosts, I don't object to finding them. When I am out of ghost mode, as it were, and I'm at a place that should not have ghosts, and I find one, I'm done. It's time to go home. It's time to go somewhere else.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Now, was the figure, did he look like he was a Civil War
yeah. I
character?
mean, it was a blue wool jacket, which would have been period
Confederate.
appropriate. Um, he had gold insignia on his shoulders. I don't know if they were epaulets or
Mhm.
some kind of rank markings. I'm not that big a Civil War buff.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean, he resembled somebody who marched through Georgia with Sherman, and
Oh, so Union.
um,
Okay.
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah, because the Confederates were hunkered down. They had artillery in their earthworks, and surprisingly, they actually slowed the advance down for about 2 days.
Wow.
And finally, Sherman moved because they had burnt the other bridges over the river, and Sherman found another ford and basically flanked the Confederates, and they retreated back towards Charleston. And from there, well, Sherman came up, burned Columbia, and headed towards his date with destiny at Bentonville. So,
Mm.
but yeah, it was definitely one of the more unique experiences I've had, because most of the time when I've had a ghost experience, I've gone actively looking for something.
Right.
And this was one of those cases that was just, I just wanted to get my history on for a little bit and get some exercise. And well, it wasn't quite the case that day. So,
Oh my goodness. Wow. And speaking of Sherman burning Columbia, sorry to put you on the spot, but I just got curious. Are there any like ghost stories coming out of Columbia from the Civil War and the burning in particular?
um, not necessarily from the burning. There was a sighting in 1914, and Wade Hampton passed away in, make sure I'm thinking right. I believe Hampton passed away in 1909.
Hmm.
And on Blanding Street in downtown Columbia, a veteran of the Hampton's Legion reported seeing General Hampton in full bigger, a man of 40 instead of a man of 80 when he
Mm.
passed,
Hmm.
and intact because I want to say after Hampton left the Senate, he lost a leg to a horseback riding accident. This gentleman was full of vigor, fully
Wow.
intact, and he appeared in the sky. And apparently, according to the state paper, several other witnesses observed the same thing. And there was thought that it could be, a sign of the apocalypse,
Oh my goodness.
some manner of optical illusion or some such. Ironically, about 2 months later, Archduke Ferdinand got shot in Sarajevo.
Hmm.
World War One started, and according to the description, it resembles the statue of Wade Hampton on the State House grounds now.
Mm.
But it was full color, brown beard, gray
Sure.
horse, gray uniform. So um, that's one of my favorites from Columbia proper.
Hmm.
Um, and it ties into the Civil War side. And with Hampton's connection to Columbia, that's not a real surprise to me at all.
Wow.
So
Yeah, we went to the State House a couple weeks ago for a fun adventure, and I loved seeing the bronze stars on the, is it the west side of the building? Can't remember which side, but obviously where the
yes,
artillery had hit the building, and just seeing
yeah,
the all the various statues and uh, the little, you'll miss it if you don't know, if you don't focus on it. But I wrote a newsletter about where the original State House was, and it was, there's a little baby stone marker where that was too, and just
hmm
you can just feel the history. And we walked up and down through University of South Carolina, the old horseshoe as well. That
hmm
feels haunted. That feels a little haunted over in that part of the town as well,
it
the
is.
city. Yeah.
It is. While you were doing the State House grounds, did you happen to meet Major Lunsford?
No. Tell us about him.
Um, Major Swanson Lunsford was a native of Virginia who served in the Continental Army in South Carolina. Retired at the rank of major and moved to became Columbia. Um, Died, I want to say, of smallpox in 1786, and was buried on his property, which is now part of the State House grounds. And
Ah,
until Huey Long was buried at the Louisiana State Capitol, Major Lunsford was the only person buried on the grounds of a state capitol in the
right.
Union.
Interesting.
And he is fond of the ladies, and he likes to give affectionate pats on the backside if you walk past his
No.
grave. Yeah,
No.
yeah. Um,
What?
and he is I think it's one of his great granddaughters married a native of Chester, and there
Mhm,
are some letters of hers in the Chester Library,
mhm.
and I think in the Chester Historical Museum as well. No mention of the ghost, but it does talk about her connection to the state capitol. So yeah, and
So,
there goes inside the state house, and of course the horseshoe is haunted too. So
oh yeah, it seems so haunted.
that's a
So
whole nother,
wait,
that's a whole other episode. Yeah.
a whole another episode. So wait, Colonel Lunsford as a ghost. So the ghost of Colonel Lunsford will go up to ladies and pat them on the behind.
If you no, it's a major. If you go
Okay, sorry, Major.
past this marker, it's one. I want to say it's at the corner of your Bay and Assembly, that
Okay.
far corner.
Mhm.
Um, if you walk past, he may um affectionately greet you with that pat. Yeah.
Oh
Um.
my gosh.
So, but I mean, again, it's been 250 years thereabouts. So he may have been taking a break the day you went past. I don't know.
Perhaps. Perhaps. I love it. Um, can you tell us a little bit about your short stories that you wrote? As I was reading through your bio, I got curious about your Southern Gothic writing. Can you give us kind of a synopsis of your stories?
um. Yeah, without giving too much away, there's a ghost story told from the perspective of the ghost. He does not know he's a ghost, but by the end of the story, it becomes glaringly obvious that he is. Um, a story that my mother told me about a axe murder in a house we rented um, when I was in diapers. I have no memory of it, but there was a incident in a rental house that we lived in 50 years before. That shows up in two different stories. There's a mashup of the wild hunt and the supposed hauntings on Highway 666 out in New
Hmm.
Mexico,
Hmm.
and several others. The title story is called Creek Walking, and the
Hmm.
first half of it is basically a mod growing up on a cotton mill hill in the late 70s and early 80s. Kind of if you grew up in a small town like Lyman, Honea Path, Berea, I mean, any of those, Marietta, any of those kind of towns, you will immediately recognize the mischief that me and my friends got into. And of course, about halfway through, then there's a ghost story. But
Right. Awesome.
so it's a little bit of everything in there. It's I'm proud of it, but well, it's my
I love
baby.
it.
So
It is your baby. I love it. And as you've written all of your various books, what has surprised or even encouraged you about your research and kind of delving into this history?
um, the biggest surprise for me was the sheer number of stories that have not been previously collected. I mean, you'll have a mention of a story in this source or in this newspaper or in this local history, but no one else had gone and put them together.
Mm,
And the encouragement part, and every county in the state has at least one ghost story.
I
I
bet.
mean,
Yeah. Hmm.
which is surprising because there are several states that you struggle to find one or two, but South
Sure.
Carolina's got them in spades. And another thing I've been encouraged by people who share their experiences.
Mm,
A lot of them are very personal, deal with return of deceased family, incidents at their various houses. And then there are some who say, I've been to the Fort Sumter, I've been to the State House,
sure.
and your experience matched mine. And
Right.
that makes me feel good because I feel like even before they've read the book or what heard me tell the story, I'm getting it right, which is kind of it's a ghost story, so it doesn't really matter about details, but I'm getting it right, and that makes the historian in me happy.
And speaking of the historian in you, can you tell us a little bit about how you research? Like you've mentioned newspapers a couple times. Are you looking at old kind of microfiche? Is it all online now? And how are you and which papers are you looking at? I'm curious about like and how far back are you going?
I have gone as far back as the oldest published source I used, I believe, was 1850.
Okay.
Um, I go to main library branches, historical museum, society museums. Online, thankfully, there's a lot of good material there.
Hmm.
Um, two websites in particular, archive.org and Hathitrust.net
Okay.
are wonderful resources for out of print material. There are a bunch of local history, family histories in there that you can dig through, and I enjoy the research part a lot because I'm learning about the places and I'm able to critically evaluate if the story even fits. Like the slaves who built Poinsett Bridge speaking Chinese,
Right.
because I know the history of South Carolina,
Yes.
I can immediately discount as wrong.
Right.
Whereas someone who doesn't, well, Chinese were laborers on railroads. It makes sense. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it enables me to filter out some of the wheat from the chaff, and I kind of can tell what works and what doesn't. So, but I mean, you just have to be patient. And most of the newspapers are still on microfilm because microfilm's the best way to retain information. I mean, it's
Hmm.
digital copies are great because you can stay home and search them, but there's something to be said for going and smelling old paper and hand cranking a microfilm machine to find that one article.
I bet it's
I'm
like
partial to it.
finding a diamond, little like a treasure every time.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, it
Mm,
is.
love that. All right, we're gonna head into our fun Carolina questionnaire section of the interview, where I ask you a bunch
Okay.
of questions about South Carolina and your experiences. So the first question is, which historical figure from South Carolina would you most like to have dinner with?
John C. Calhoun.
Great answer.
Because I want to know how he went from being an ardent nationalist to being the foremost advocate for secession and state rights in less than 12 years.
Interesting.
What broke him to make him shift so seriously? And I
And do
have
you
an
think,
idea, but I won't.
yeah,
Go ahead.
do you think it was this, was it the slavery issue?
Um, no, I honestly think the reason he shifted so much was Jackson chose Van Buren as his successor instead of him. I really and truly think I think it was just a case of hurt feelings, and he decided that if I can be the spokesman for the South and for slavery, that'll give me a political base, and I can go from there and be president anyway. So, but again, I would love to have dinner with him and just kind of say why.
Absolutely.
Other than
Um,
that, John Henry Hammond would be another one.
tell
James
us who
Henry
he
Hammond.
is.
James Henry Hammond was governor of South Carolina in the late 1840s, and he was senator right before the Civil War. The most famous quote from him was, "You dare not wage war on cotton because cotton is king." It's King Cotton as a motif through the Civil War. And there are also rumors, and his journals are fascinating. There was a scandal about his nieces, who were also the nieces of Wade Hampton the third.
Mm,
Um, Supposedly he was inappropriate with them.
hmm,
How inappropriate depends. Um, and how the Hamptons kind of kept him in check so he could not fulfill his ambition of being a senator until much later in life, that kind of thing. And there were also rumors that he could have been bisexual and different things. He would be another one that I wouldn't mind having
mm.
join the party, so to speak, and just kind of riddle me this, so to speak.
Yeah, riddle me this.
Those
Exactly.
would be my two. Yeah,
Got it.
those would be my two. Yeah.
Sounds good. And if you could go back in time to any period in South Carolina history, and I've had to add this piece, and be safe from any danger, when would it be and why?
I would go back to the New Deal from about 1933 to 1940. And because I want to be a part of the Federal Writers Project with part of the
Ah, yes.
WPA, and
Yes.
partly so I can see the change from small dirt farming sharecroppers, 3/4 of the state covered in cotton, and see how that begins to change to the South Carolina we know now. Because
Hmm.
that's when it all started with Blake's. Moultrie and Marion being built,
Sure.
electrification coming in, improved highways. I want to be there for the start of, in quotes, modern South Carolina. And I think that would be a really cool time to go back to.
Absolutely. And then what is the most surprising thing you've learned about South Carolina history along the way?
That the revolution in South Carolina was largely a civil war. Um, we hold the record for the most skirmishes and battles of any state that was involved in the revolution.
Mm.
And in most cases, it was literally neighbor against neighbor. I mean, it was
Wow. I hadn't
partisan.
really thought about that, or I
Yeah,
didn't know
it,
about that.
it was partisan warfare. I think there's a book I want to say by
Write it down.
Russell Ziegler called Partisan War. And it talks about Bloody Bill Cunningham, Francis Marion, Colonel Cobb from Chesterfield, different people. And it was literally one of those things where I ride out, I burn your crops, steal your horses. You come back next week and you burn mine and you shoot my child in the yard. And
Mm.
and there are no generals. There are battles like East Mountain, Cowpens, and Camden. But 9/10 of most of the deaths were from basically neighborhood fights. I mean,
Wow.
it's fascinating when you start digging into it how much blood has been shed in the state since 1670. It
Yes,
really is
absolutely.
fascinating.
Hmm. All right. Favorite South Carolina food or dish?
A tie between banana pudding made correctly with meringue and barbecue, mustard based barbecue.
Yes, mustard based. Favorite South Carolina festival or event?
Um, I'll give the local folks some props. Hilarity here in Chester, which happens to be next weekend as we record this. The classic small town South Carolina street festival, artisans, food, bands. I mean, it's the classic small town festival.
And what's it called again?
Hilarity, but
Hilarity?
two
Okay.
L's instead of one. Yeah.
Hilarity. Oh my gosh, I love that. And what is a must-visit place in South Carolina for history buffs?
Um, got three.
Okay.
Cowpens or Kings Mountain,
Okay.
um, Red Cliff Plantation over near Aiken,
Hmm.
and Fort Sumter and Fort Moultrie.
Okay.
Any of those will give you an idea about the history of the state.
Absolutely. Amazing. And then as we kind of wrap up our interview, Tally, how can our audience support the work you are doing? Even if we need to send you some encouragement for your writer's block, how can we how can we support you?
Uh, I'm on Facebook, of course, like everybody else is. I'd appreciate it if you would buy my books. That's
Yes.
always a good way to support the starving artist.
I'll link that to
And
the newsletter.
I don't know when that's perfect. I don't know when this is going to go live, but this weekend actually, I am kicking off the first annual Southern Gothic Festival in Camden.
Oh, cool.
I'm doing a ghost story set there Friday at 7, and then Saturday the 19th. I am
Mhm.
doing ghost walks in downtown Chester with a group called Haunted Chester. And it's about a mile walk. There are some hills, so wear comfortable shoes.
Mhm.
And I'll do about a dozen stories of different places in town that have some activity, some ghost stories.
Nice. Well, this is going to go live next Monday, but we can still encourage people to hopefully maybe I can send out a separate email
There you
encouraging.
go.
I'll send it to the Facebook group. That's
Uh,
what I'll do. Southern Gothic Festival this
that'll be
weekend.
fine.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. And
Well,
I
Tally,
highly
yeah,
recommend that's going to be a cool event. I think folks will enjoy it if they're able to. Yeah,
yeah, and
not just for
this
me,
is
but
the
for the rest.
perfect time right before Halloween to kind of get out and do something spooky. I love that.
Yeah,
Well, Tally,
it
thank you
is.
so much for your time. I've loved hearing your stories. I can clearly see your passion for this. I love that you told the story that this started for you when you were just a little boy, and look at you now. You've written all these books, and
Hmm.
I really appreciate it. And as we head into spooky season, I know our listeners will love this. So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me at any time. I appreciate it.